Hello everyone, my name is
erenjaeger.
but I go by Local Small Cat here on YouTube, and today I will talk about two series that I absolutely adore. Code Geass and Attack on Titan. A few months ago, I rewatched both of them back to back, and I couldn't help but notice how similar they were in some aspects and how differently they approach the same subjects. And I really want to talk about it. This will be my first ever video essay, so it will be a little different from my previous, more humorous, heavily edited content. This will be just my thoughts. I just want to overanalyze and theorize and just yap. I'm going to yap. I have to preface this by saying my video is not a comparison of which anime is better or if Attack on Titan copied Code Geass. In my opinion, Isayama clearly drew some inspiration from Code Geass, but there is not criticism, simply an observation. Every single story and piece of media was in some way inspired by what came before it, and that is just the nature of storytelling. No story is ever 100% original. Both series are absolutely incredible in their own right. They are both in my top 3 favorite anime of all time. Even Fullmetal Alchemist, which is my absolute favorite series of all time, anime or not, drew inspiration from the classics that came before it, such as Cowboy Bebop, another series that I clearly love. I'm specifically referring to Pride, who is literally exactly this Cowboy Bebop villain. So it's all love here. This is not a competition. Obviously, I will be spoiling both series, so if you haven't watched them, I highly, highly recommend you do. If you only watched Attack on Titan, I think you would love Code Geass, and the other way around. Code Geass came out in 2006, directed by Goro Taniguchi and written by Ichiro Okouchi. It follows the story of lelouchlamperouge, an exiled prince of the Holy Britannian Empire, who obtains the power of absolute obedience. Using his newly acquired power, he leads a rebellion against the Empire in order to take revenge on his father, the Emperor. The first season of Attack on Titan came out in 2013, and it was based on the 2009 manga written and illustrated by Hajime Isayama. It's set in a post-apocalyptic world where humanity is forced to live behind walls that protect them from giant humanoid titans. It follows the story of erenjaeger, a young boy who, after witnessing the destruction of his hometown and the death of his mother, decides to join the Survey Corps and fight against the titans. The first similarity that I will discuss is a pretty obvious one, the politics. Both stories are centered around oppressive regimes that are heavily inspired by real-life historical events and governments. Code Geass is set in an alternate timeline of our real world. The Holy Britannian Empire is the successor of the British Empire. The parallels to real life are obvious. An absolute monarchy that colonized and ruled over a third of the world as the dominant military superpower. Once a nation is conquered by the Holy Britannian Empire, it becomes a colony and gets renamed as an area. Each area is designated a number, such as Area 11. This strips away each nation's identity, turning it into a mere extension of the empire. Attack on Titan doesn't use any real-life names of actual countries, but clearly drew inspiration from past oppressive governments and nations. I think the biggest and most obvious one would be Nazi Germany, specifically their anti-Jewish policies and segregation, which resemble Marley's oppressive laws towards Eldians. Specifically the internment zone and the armbands they are forced to wear at all times. It's not a one-to-one comparison by any means. I don't want to minimize the horrors that Jewish people experienced during the Third Reich. Some elements of Marley bear a resemblance to Germany, but are clearly not meant to represent the actual events that took place during that time. From what I know, Isayama never confirmed what inspired the creation of Marley, so we can only draw our own parallels between the series and real-life events. At the end of the day, it is just speculation, but some similarities are really hard to deny. There are some other parallels between Marley and other real-life historical events. You can pause and read this section if you are interested. Both stories are focused on marginalized groups within their respective societies. In Code Geass, we have the 11s, who are the Japanese. Japan is referred to as Area 11. In Attack on Titan, we have the Eldians. Unlike 11s, Eldians are not a specific real-life nationality. They are a fictional ethnicity. Both 11s and Eldians were segregated. 11s lived in slums outside of the Tokyo settlement, where they were not allowed to live after the occupation of Japan. The Tokyo settlement was the administrative capital of Area 11, and it was mostly occupied by Britannians. Similarly, the Eldians in Marley were forced to live in an internment zone inside the city of Liberio and were separated from ethnic Marleyans living in the same city. They were not allowed to leave the zone unless they had specific permits, which I assume was very rare. When Grisha and his sister left the zone without permission, she was murdered by Marleyan officers as punishment. When I rewatched Code Geass right after finishing Attack on Titan, and I heard the term Honorary Britannian, I was gagged. Because it's the exact same term used in both series to refer to the exact same thing. Honorary Britannians are numbers who vow their loyalty to the Holy Britannian Empire. In exchange for serving the Empire, they become legally almost identical to ethnic Britannians, get special privileges, are allowed to live in wealthy cities, etc. But socially, they are still discriminated against because of their ethnic background. If you refuse to serve the Empire, you will not get any privileges and you will also be discriminated against. Hence the numerous 11s who end up living in the slums. The exact same goes for honorary Marleyans. Those who choose to serve Marley in battle are awarded special privileges. Similarly, this title does not stop the societal discrimination that they will receive. Despite the titles of Honorary Britannian or Marleyan, they are still viewed as subhuman by the society that oppresses them.
なんだ、汚れたちが皿を運んでいるぞ。ああ、道理で飯が匂うわけだ。
Both series share roughly the same themes of power, survival, freedom, and justice. They are both centered around really heavy topics, such as war, nationalism, indoctrination, oppression, and revolution. But they go about it in different ways. The way I look at it, Attack on Titan is more psychological, whereas Code Geass is more political. Attack on Titan has a more human approach to these subjects. It focuses on the consequences war has on people. The aftermath, the destruction of homes, the loss of loved ones, the constant fear they live in awaiting the next attack, the pressure to join the army that Eldians carry on their shoulders, whether they are on Paradise Island or in Marley, the lifelong trauma they were all left with, both physical and psychological. Meanwhile, Code Geass is more focused on Lelouch's tactical abilities and political strategies. It's basically a political power struggle within the royal family. I think both of these shows managed to portray the concept of indoctrination brilliantly, and in a very similar way, through children. Nina and Gabby are prime examples of this indoctrination. And while I absolutely despise both of them, they are an integral part of the story and the message the shows are trying to get across. Basically, they are insufferable for a reason. Gabby did have a redemption arc throughout season 4, and I did feel pity for her, even in the beginning, because she was an Eldian child fighting in a war, serving a country that oppressed her in the hopes that she would be accepted and treated as one of their own. I was rooting for Gabby to finally escape Marley and work through her internalized hatred for Eldians and herself. This doesn't make her any less annoying though. Two things can be true at once. Seeing her growth throughout the season, that arduous process of unlearning her deep-rooted hatred was very impactful, in my opinion. This can actually be seen with Rainer, Bertold, and Annie as well. When I first found out about their true intentions, the mission Marley sent them on, and their belief that all Eldians on Paradise Island were devils that needed to be eradicated, I genuinely felt a sense of betrayal, because we were made to believe they were all just trying to fight against a common enemy, the Titans. Once I found out they were the enemy, I resented them. But during season 4, when we actually start seeing the circumstances they were raised in, while I was still condemning their actions, it was very hard for me to blame them. It all made sense to me why they chose to go down this path. That false hope that Marley gave them, that they could escape their own fate. It was like escaping a death sentence, a life of confinement for themselves as well as their families. When you try to see things from their perspective, it was just self-preservation at the end of the day, which is ingrained in all of us. Their actions were horrific, not excusing that, but you can understand the psychology behind it, and you cannot put all the blame on them. They were children trying to escape an oppressive regime in a way that was most accessible to them. We should blame the regime for forcing these children to become war machines and brainwashing them into thinking eradicating their own kind is the only way to gain freedom. In order to be treated as humans, they had to discard a part of themselves that could not be changed. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't change being Eldian. I was privileged enough to never have to hide or try to deny a part of myself in order to be accepted by society or my peers. So who am I to condemn these children who were raised their whole lives in an internment zone and seen as subhuman for wanting desperately to be considered equal? And I know the fandom makes a lot of jokes about Reiner wanting to die, but the reality is, he was torn apart. He had to choose between eradicating his own kind and betraying, in his mind, the people he loved the most and wanted to provide a better life for, his family. He was put into this position since he was a young child. He was wired to believe he was doing the right thing. It was ingrained in him. And eventually he had to face that this reality he believed in was a lie. And he was only being used to serve the interests of a government that could not give two fucks about his life. He had to challenge everything he believed in, and in the end, he made the right choice. I went from despising Reiner to actually feeling pity and so much empathy for him. He is, in my opinion, one of the most complex and well-written characters in the series, if not the best written. Unlike Gabby, Nina was the oppressor. She was Britannian, raised in an aristocratic family, and clearly taught from an early age to view herself as being superior to Elevens. The other Britannian students were also indoctrinated to believe that Elevens were dangerous and less than. But once Suzaku joined their school and became a part of their club, they got to properly interact with an 11 for the first time, and quickly realized he's just like them. You could see a pretty obvious change in their mindset as soon as they befriended Suzaku. But even then, Nina was still refusing to even slightly challenge her racist beliefs. She didn't even try to see Elevens as people. If Suzaku, president of the good guy club, sometimes annoyingly so, cannot change her mind, then all hope is lost. Her character development throughout the entire series was abysmal. She literally only got worse and worse, more and more hateful and dangerous. Her obsessive tendencies, combined with her adamant hatred for Elevens, were a match made in hell. She ended up joining the military, created a nuclear bomb, and then acted surprised when that bomb killed 35 million people.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on.
I personally think she was meant to represent the people who refuse to change their racist beliefs and portray how dangerous their hate can become if it's left to fester for so long. This mindset is dangerous. It's what gets people killed. And did she show that loud and clear? Don't be a Nina. And personally, I was very dissatisfied with her half-assed revelation at the end of the series. It took 35 million deaths for you to realize racism is wrong. I genuinely believe the consequences of her actions should have been way harsher. I think maybe even her death would have been a better choice considering the trajectory of her storyline. Showing the destruction she caused as well as causing her own destruction would have been such a powerful message. Similarly to how Eren had to die at the end because he had to pay for the lives he had taken. And I wanted to point out how similar these two scenes were as well. In some cases, it is better to redeem a character than to kill it off in order to get a message across. Gabi and Reiner deserved to be redeemed because they weren't yet too far gone and they actually had a reasoning behind their actions. They were also victims. Even if we don't condone their actions, we can sympathize with their circumstances and understand why they did those bad things. Their development was also really well written. But in Nina's case, I think she was already too far gone, and trying to superficially redeem her at the very end felt more like a slap in the face rather than a lesson. Her suffering serious consequences would have been a real lesson. Genocide should not be forgiven. Another similarity that shocked me when I rewatched the series was the name of the power. In Code Geass, the Geass is referred to as the power of the kings. It's a supernatural ability that manifests differently in each individual depending on their inner desires. Lelouch's Geass is the ability to command other people just by looking at them. Other examples include the ability to alter someone's memories by making direct eye contact, hearing the thoughts of anyone within a 500-meter radius, or even the power to make anyone fall in love with you. In Attack on Titan, the Eldians who are able to transform into intelligent titans have the power of the titans. I just thought the wording was very interesting and similar, even if the powers themselves are very different. The power of the Titans isn't nearly as diverse as the Geass. It has a limited number of manifestations, such as the Attack Titan, the Colossal Titan, the Jaw Titan, etc. Each has its specific characteristics, and while it slightly changes appearance based on the vessel, like it literally looks like the human, the powers aren't changing based on the vessel's personality or desires. Like all possessors of the Colossal Titan will have the same abilities that get passed down from user to user. So I guess the power is technically a difference, but they have the same name. Okay? While at first glance, this might seem like a huge difference, personally, I feel like the vibe is very similar. Teenagers controlling huge vessels fight each other to the death. In Code Geass, the military fights using nightmares, which are basically just mecha. Giant humanoid robots that are being controlled by a single pilot. In Attack on Titan, intelligent titans are humans in titan form. They are also used by the military. You could say they control the titans, but technically they are the titans. Visually, we also see their human forms inside of the titan as well. And it bears a striking resemblance to mecha pilot imagery. As a little side note, I think it's funny how Code Geass is mecha fighting each other, Attack on Titan is beasts fighting each other, and if you put them together, you kinda get Evangelion? By the way, if you liked Code Geass and Attack on Titan and you haven't seen Neon Genesis Evangelion yet, you should. You would love it. Lelouch and Eren have roughly the same family dynamic, obviously in two very different contexts. Same family, different fonts. Both of their mothers were murdered, an event that, in both cases, was the catalyst for their journey. After witnessing his mother's death, Eren decided to join the Survey Corps and kill all Titans in order to avenge his mother and his hometown. After the assassination of Lelouch's mother, he was stripped away from his home and exiled by his father, the Emperor. Lelouch started the rebellion in order to get revenge on his father. Both of their fathers were antagonistic characters. In Code Geass, the Emperor was the main villain for the majority of the series, until Lelouch replaced him. In Attack on Titan, for the first 2 seasons, Grisha was definitely an antagonist, even if he wasn't a villain. From Eren's point of view, his father turned him into a Titan and then disappeared, leaving him and Mikasa to fend for themselves. Eventually, Lelouch finds out that his mother wasn't really dead, or at least her spirit wasn't, and his parents were working together in order to achieve their shared goal of uniting all of humanity into a single entity. Eren discovers the truth about his father's disappearance. He ate him. Eren also finds out that he murdered his own mother. These reveals don't change the resentment they feel towards their fathers. If anything, they hate them even more. In the end, in both series, the protagonist is responsible for the death of his parents. After losing their mothers and being forcefully separated from their fathers, both are left with only one family member. Lelouch is left with his younger sister Nunnally that he has to care for. She is also the reason he decides to start the revolution in order to create a safe world for her to live in. He also has a group of friends that he cares for, and Suzaku, who used to be his best friend. They lost contact for a few years, but got reunited when he joined the academy Lelouch attends. Eren is left with Mikasa, who is technically not related to him, but she was taken in and raised by his parents. He also has Armin, who is his best friend, and he befriends the Survey Corps squad. One interesting parallel that I noticed in both series is the direct confrontation between the protagonist and his best friends. Lelouch and Suzaku are enemies for basically the whole series, fighting for opposing sides, at first not even being aware of each other's identities on the battlefield. Lelouch ends up fighting against Nunnally as well, under the guise of Zero. In the end, Suzaku is the one who kills Lelouch, taking on the persona of Zero. Similarly, Mikasa and Armin, the two people closest to Eren, end up fighting against him. In the end, Mikasa is the one that kills Eren. The Britannian royal family weren't aware they were fighting their own brother. Suzaku wasn't aware he was fighting his best friend. Similarly, Eren and the Survey Corps weren't aware they were fighting against their own members and friends, Reiner, Bertold, and Danny. I actually love that the most important people in their lives, the ones they love or once loved the most, are the ones who end up killing them. I think it's very symbolic of their development as characters, the hero turned villain. Both Lelouch and Eren end up having the same fate, uniting the world against a common enemy. In order for humanity to advance, they had to work together towards a shared goal. People who are fighting on opposing sides could join forces to defeat a greater evil. The protagonists became that greater evil. In Code Geass, this was Lelouch's plan. He knew it was necessary to stop the conflict. He abolished the monarchy by becoming the head of the monarchy and then killing himself. In Attack on Titan, this was a direct result of Eren's actions, but not his intention. Eldians and Marleyans stopped fighting each other temporarily and joined forces to stop the rumble. But shortly after Eren's death, political conflict resumed between Paradise Island and Marley. They both united the world against a common enemy, but the aftermath was very different. Lelouch is my absolute favorite anime character of all time. I even have a tattoo appointment booked for this October to get his portrait on my arm. So I might be a little biased. Maybe just a tiny bit. And if you watched my previous video, highly recommend. By the way, you already know I hate Eren. But my dislike for him as a person doesn't change the fact that he's a very fascinating and complex character. It would be a disservice to Isayama to pretend he's not an exceptionally well-written protagonist. In my last video, I barely scratched the surface of his character, and it was in a more humorous and obviously biased way. But now, I want to take a more objective look at both Lelouch and Eren and discuss what sets them apart from each other, because they are absolute polar opposites. First and most obvious difference is their intelligence. To put it bluntly, Lelouch is a genius and Eren is a dumbass. Jokes aside, their intellectual abilities make a world of difference and are reflected in their actions. First things first, we need to mention their education. While there were schools within the walls, remember Erwin's father was a teacher, I doubt Eren received the same level of education as Lelouch, who grew up as a prince and then became a student at a prestigious private academy. He didn't get high grades in school, but not because he couldn't, he just didn't care to. He considered schoolwork too trivial. Instead, he preferred to challenge himself intellectually, usually playing chess games against various noblemen. By the way, what the hell is up with these underground chess games? Is this an illegal activity in the Code Geass universe?
FBI, open up!
Lelouch was naturally a highly intelligent person, while Eren wasn't. And I don't mean to insult him, it's just a fact. He's a Naruto Uzumaki type of guy. Very hot-headed, determined, and impatient. He tends to act first and think later. On the opposite end, Lelouch is very calm and calculated. He doesn't tend to act on a whim or without a plan. And he has insane strategical skills. He's a light Yagami type of guy. Way less evil though. Someone like Eren, who is led by his feelings and impulses, will find it much harder to be in a position of power, especially a power this monumental. Someone like Lelouch, or for example Erwin, who is led by rationality and critical thinking, is much more capable of assessing a high-stress situation and finding a solution that has long-lasting benefits. It was very hard for Eren to consider things objectively. He was always blinded by his emotions. He was not a person fit to make such decisions. Obviously, it's not all black and white. Eren wasn't a complete moron the entire series, and Lelouch wasn't this perfect angel who can do no wrong. They are very complex characters with highs and lows. In some cases, very low lows, but their intelligence levels show a drastic difference in the way they utilize the power they are given. The Geass is used very strategically, especially since it can only be used once per person. Lelouch always made sure to use it at the right time in order to carry out his plans. Eren used his power impulsively, especially in the beginning, and once he gained the Founding Titan, he used the Rumble to satisfy his own selfish needs, without considering the lives that would be destroyed in the process. At their core, they are two lost boys who were betrayed by the world in one way or another, who let their thirst for revenge lead their actions. They both had immense trauma since childhood. Their lives were stolen from them. I am not in any way trying to blame them for wanting revenge. I would too. I think Eren was more honest about his motives, while Lelouch insisted that his actions were in the name of justice. He used Zero as a front, used justice as a means to acquire power and followers. But his end goal was always protecting Nunnally, avenging his mother, and defeating his father. I do believe he had a moral compass leading him as well. He's not an evil person. I think he genuinely saw an opportunity to do both, take revenge and free Japan and the rest of the world. He wanted to create a safe world for Nunnally to live in, and he genuinely believed destroying the Empire is the only way to achieve that. His actions, while selfish at times, were beneficial to the world. He was what the world needed at the time. Because of his aristocratic upbringing and his intelligence, he did see himself as superior to other people. He was arrogant. It would be delusional to pretend he wasn't developing a god complex after taking on the persona of Zero. But unlike Light Yagami, for example, his god complex wasn't the source of his demise. He wasn't delusional about the extent of his abilities. He could acknowledge when someone outsmarted him, which happened a few times throughout the series. In the end, I think it was his god complex that saved the world. He realized that becoming the emperor, passing on the symbol of Zero to Suzaku, and sacrificing himself was exactly what the people needed, even if he would be painted as a villain. And knowing he would be the savior of the world made it possible for him to go through with the plan. Savior of the world, god complex, match made in heaven. The biggest difference between Lelouch and Eren is their character development. Lelouch started off as a selfish person who used the people around him to achieve his own goals and ended up sacrificing himself for the greater good. On the other hand, Eren started off as a genuinely good person who turned selfish. He wanted to fight for what was right. He wanted to free his people from the terror of the Titans. In the end, he became the literal personification of that terror, the very thing he swore to destroy in the first place. Just like Lelouch becoming the emperor. But unlike Lelouch, he didn't do it for the sake of saving the world. And I would like to talk about Eren's descent into madness. I don't find it surprising that Eren ended up taking the path that he did. Not justifying it, but I can definitely see how it happened. He lost his family at a young age, joined the military as a teenager, and lived under the constant fear and anticipation of a Titan attack. He was given a power that he did not ask for, which came with a lot of responsibility as well as resentment from his peers. Everyone feared it and turned against him at first, and when they realized he was on their side, he was turned into a military weapon. He was given the responsibility to save humanity, one that he had to bear by himself, as he was the only one who could transform into an intelligent Titan. He had to live every single day, knowing that if he made a mistake, he would be responsible for the death of everyone he loved, and possibly humanity as a whole. That is an incomprehensible pressure to have on your shoulders, especially when you weren't equipped with the mental strength and intelligence required to make such difficult decisions. Almost any human being would completely lose their mind and break down under these circumstances. In the end, unsurprisingly, Eren crumbled under that pressure. Lelouch did not have that pressure on his shoulders. He was Britannian. Cullen, on the other hand, is a much better example of that. She, as well as the other Black Knights, had the fate of their own people, the Japanese, in their hands. Even if she was half Britannian, she still chose her mother's maiden Japanese name and chose to fight in the revolution to liberate the Japanese. She was half Japanese. At the end of the day, even if Lelouch decided to fight against Britannia, he still experienced the privilege of being Britannian, even in his exile. If he never decided to start a revolution, he could have easily lived the rest of his life as a normal Britannian citizen alongside Nunnally. He could hide behind the mask of Zero and protect himself with anonymity. Eren did not have that option. Eldians, 11s, any oppressed group does not have that option. Lelouch never experienced oppression. And I don't mean this as criticism against Lelouch, it's just an undeniable fact. It was easier for him, as a Britannian, to fight against his own people than it is for the oppressed to fight against their oppressors. Also, being part of the royal family, he knew exactly who his opponents were and what abilities they each had. He could easily be one step ahead because he knew exactly what he was up against. Well, for the most part. Not always. Eren was tossed in battle without any information about who he was up against. He didn't know what Titans were, what he was, where they came from, if there was even an end to this battle. Also, Lelouch had the Geass, which put him at an advantage over his adversaries, as most of them did not have the Geass. Eren had the Titan powers, but so did his opponents, and he was alone against multiple intelligent Titans. So even though Lelouch is clearly more intelligent, he also had insider information, access to resources, and the security of his anonymity, at least in the beginning. It would be unfair to pretend Eren started off with the same privileges as Lelouch. The odds were against him from the very first episode. And let's not forget that Marley was an industrial and military superpower, while Paradise Island were still fighting with swords and cannons. Even if he had the tactical abilities of Lelouch, he could not defeat Marley without the military resources and knowledge. They were basically stuck 100 years behind their opponents. The 11s were on a more level playing field with the Britannian forces, even if they had an obvious disadvantage. They at least had the skills and knowledge of modern-day warfare. They just needed the more advanced military resources and the leadership that Zero provided them. I also don't want to diminish the struggles Lelouch faced by simply calling him a privileged Britannian. It's a lot more complex than that. He felt cast aside by his own family, by his father, but we can acknowledge his personal struggles while also acknowledging the social privilege he experienced. To Two things can be true at once. It doesn't make him a worse person in any way. The same way, Eren is a horrible person despite his lack of privilege. It's the actions that you choose to take that make you who you are, not the circumstances you were born in that are completely out of your control. Those circumstances can be explanations or reasons as to why an individual acts a certain way, but they don't absolve you of the consequences of your actions. Eren's unfair circumstances don't justify him committing genocide. This is a complicated discussion because each person has a different belief system. Each person has a different interpretation of right and wrong, good and bad. But I will give my own perspective on this. And keep in mind, I will use the words good, evil, etc. very loosely because no human is completely one or the other. Human beings are very complex. Eren is not a good person. He wasn't born evil. He was broken down until he completely lost himself. He became a shell of his past self, a shell of a human. But the cards that he was dealt brought out his true colors. His decisions at the end of the series reflected the deepest desires of his heart. Everything I have said so far was more so an explanation as to how we ended up here. But the truth of the matter is, he chose, he was not forced. It was his own decision to commit genocide. He let his thirst for revenge win, and he saw this as a way of taking revenge while protecting the only people he cared about. He turned his friends into heroes by forcing them to defeat him. He wasn't willing to sacrifice the people he loved in order to protect the rest of the world, the way Lelouch was. By the end of season 4, he hated the world. Popping in from the future, it's already November, I already have Lelouch on my arm, he's already healed. But there's a few things that I forgot to add when I was filming this video, and I think they're really important and needed to be mentioned. Many people seem to believe Eren is actually a hero, not a villain, and use the argument of he started the Rumble so he could get rid of Titans, so he actually saved humanity. Yes, he rid humanity of Titans, but he also committed genocide and admitted to his own selfish reasons for doing so. He did something beneficial for the world, but destroyed so much of it in the process. And the argument of, oh, he's a good person because he wanted to protect his friends is dog shit. Just because someone is a good friend, that doesn't mean they can't also be a horrible person. I'm sure some of the most cruel monsters in history also had loved ones that they cared about. That doesn't suddenly erase their heinous crimes. Pretending Eren... Oh! Say hello! Say hello! She wants pets, and I need to film. I need to get this video up.
Open the door or I'm gonna throw rocks through your windows, you dumb whore.
Pretending Eren was a small little baby who did nothing wrong is diminishing the complexity of his character. He wanted to save humanity from Titans while also taking revenge on Marley, while also turning his friends into heroes. He can feel all of these conflicting feelings all at once, love, hatred, thirst for revenge, etc., because he is a human being with complex emotions. He isn't perfect. That's the point. Humans are capable of committing horrible things. Attack on Titan is a critique on war and human violence and the devastation it brings. The point of the story was never that Eren was a misunderstood hero who was actually the good guy the entire time. He is a product of human violence, a result of the war the show is trying to critique in the first place. He is also a victim, but that doesn't justify destroying other people's lives. It's a vicious cycle that humans fall into. Hurt people hurt people. Isayama didn't want to say that genocide was the answer to this conflict. The series is telling us that violence and war is never the solution, and it will only ever bring pain and suffering. And I saw a lot of people say that if you hate Eren, you just didn't understand the show and his character. And I completely disagree with that statement. Just because a character is complex, that doesn't mean I have to like them. It doesn't mean that I have to agree with their actions. I can appreciate how well written he is and still dislike him. And I think it's actually insulting to imply someone is dumb just because they dislike a character who committed genocide. Personally, and I also stated this in my previous video, I don't believe that getting rid of Titans is worth murdering a third of the world's population. I don't believe the end justifies the means. You are allowed to disagree. That's your opinion. But I personally will never believe that genocide is justified under any circumstance. He did it. What's done is done. I understand why he did it. And I am allowed to critique his actions. The same way you are allowed to like him. That's your prerogative. Lelouch. My God, I bit my tongue. Lelouch, at his core, was in my opinion a good person. And I genuinely believe that. Some of his actions were morally wrong, and many people lost their lives. But it was never his intention to do so. And obviously, this is a very nuanced conversation. But watching Code Geass, I never got the feeling that he wanted to do harm. At first, all he cared about was Nunnally. She was the most important person in his life. But when Nunnally joined the Empire's side, he wasn't blinded by his love for her. He wasn't willing to sacrifice the world for Nunnally. He knew it wasn't right. Despite Lelouch being a morally grey character, he always differentiated right from wrong. He wasn't trying to pretend that his actions were always right. For example, with the Euphemia incident, he could recognize how horrific it was and still use it to his advantage in order to defeat the Empire, which obviously makes him morally grey. And to expand a bit on the Euphemia incident, I obviously think what happened was horrific. We can all agree on that. And it was unfair that the blame fell on Yuffie. I also liked Yuffie, and it sucks that she was painted as the perpetrator. But I cannot fully condemn Lelouch for using this situation in order to benefit the cause of the Black Knights. If he were to come forward and reveal the power of the Geass, the whole revolution would fall apart. The Black Knights would fall apart, and their mission, liberating Japan from the colonizers, would fail. The 11s who were murdered, their deaths would have been in vain. I understand why he made sure that this tragedy wouldn't be for nothing, that the deaths of these 11s would end up helping them liberate the rest of Japan. It was morally wrong to not come forward and clear Euphemia's name, but keeping silent and letting her take the blame ended up helping the Japanese, the people who were hurt in the first place. Instead of doing the right thing in the moment, he knew that taking the morally wrong path would end up helping more people in the future. Hence why I called him morally grey. A morally wrong action that he decided to take for the greater good. And also, Lelouch never meant for this to happen. It was a genuine accident. He loved Euphemia and he would have never given her this command on purpose. He never wanted to harm these people or paint Euphemia as a vicious murderer. His intent was never malicious. He tried to make the most out of a very unfortunate situation in order to benefit the victims.
俺のギアス
ゼロ私たちを日本救世主のあなただけ
A lot of the deaths that occurred were outside of his control. He never wanted to use the Geass on Yuffie, or Shirley's death. He never meant for it to happen. It was Rollo who killed her. But so much of the blame fell on Lelouch or on Zero because this chain of actions and consequences started with his revolution. He was at the center of it, so all the fault was directed at him, sometimes rightfully so. And he did feel guilty for all of it, even if it was out of his control in some instances. I don't think he realized in the beginning just how many casualties a revolution, a full-fledged war, would bring, especially his loved ones. He understood there would be human casualties and consequences, but the reality of it all hit him when it was already too late. I think sacrificing himself in the end was also a way to repent for his sins, a way to pay back the lives that were lost because of his actions. And I saw some people calling Lelouch and the other characters terrorists. Granted, they were very old memes. We're talking like 2010, but regardless, they are out there. So I wanted to discuss it because I have mixed feelings about it. Terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. A revolution is defined as a forcible overthrow of a government or social order in favor of a new system. These terms can and do intersect. There is also revolutionary terrorism, which is what I believe the Black Knights would fall under. But I will take these memes at face value and assume these specific jokes refer to what the average person understands by terrorism, which is violence against civilians. Lelouch was a revolutionary. He used his power to fight against a corrupt government. His goal was to take down the system that was actively oppressing a big part of the world. He was fighting against Britannia's military, the soldiers who decided to join the military and knew they were putting their lives on the line. There ended up being millions of civilian casualties, but those resulted from either accidents, such as Euphemia's attack, or unexpected weapons used by his enemy, Nina's nuclear bomb. His intention was not to harm the innocent civilians, which is what terrorism is. Some civilians ended up being caught up in these operations, but the Black Knights never intended to harm them. If anything, Eren was the one who started the rumble, knowing the ones who would suffer the most are civilians, innocent people who have nothing to do with the military or the government in power. I am from Romania, a country that was under a communist dictatorship until 1989. The only reason that I have the right to vote today is because of the revolution that took down the regime. This was only 35 years ago. My parents were my age when this revolution took place. The people who sacrificed themselves in order to take down our oppressors are why this country is now a democracy. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have rights now. We would still be oppressed by the government. So, obviously, I strongly believe in the power of revolting, starting from a protest all the way to a full-fledged revolution. I am actively benefiting from the aftermath of the 1989 revolution. Calling revolutionaries terrorists is diminishing the significance of a revolution and the bravery these people display, especially since the word terrorism usually carries negative connotations. Revolutions bring very important changes to an entire country. They represent the power of the citizens who choose to fight back against the corrupt systems that have failed them. Reducing Lelouch and the Black Knights to terrorists feels like a massive misrepresentation of their character and the cause they are fighting for. Like, technically, could you categorize them as a terrorist group? Yes, but I still feel like they deserve more credit than that. I feel like the term revolutionary is more encompassing of what they stand for and what they managed to achieve. Just something I wanted to discuss because I find it a very interesting topic. Am I overanalyzing a dead meme from 15 years ago? Yes, I am. Should we move on to the next section? Yes, we should. Eren was established as a hero since the beginning, while Lelouch wasn't. Eren was presented as an innocent victim who took a stand against the attacker, the Titans. Erenjaeger was the name everyone uttered when they talked about the fight against the Titans. Even if he became a villain as the show progressed, he still started off as a hero in this story. Lelouch only became a hero once he put on a mask and took on the persona of Zero. He never lied, but he wasn't truthful about his identity and background. He fought alongside 11s, who assumed he was one of them, because why would he oppose the Empire otherwise? The moment he revealed himself, he was seen as a villain because of who he was. Lelouch himself was never a hero in this story. Zero was. Zero was a symbol of freedom, of revolution. Suzaku took on the role of Zero following Lelouch's death because Lelouch and Zero were never one and the same. Lelouchvibritannia was an exiled prince turned emperor. Even if he was behind the mask of Zero for so long, these actions were never attributed to him. Lelouchvibritannia was the emperor that needed to die in order for the monarchy to be abolished. We, the viewers, can see him as a hero in the story, but for the world, he was a villain. Zero, being this unknown masked figure, allowed other people to project their own ideals and beliefs onto him. He became whatever that person wanted to see him as. An 11, a hero, a revolutionary, a traitor, etc. And I think this was a very wise decision on the writer's part, because it would be insensitive to portray a Britannian as the savior of the Japanese. And realistically, the Japanese would have never followed a Britannian, and especially one that is part of the royal family, the monarchy that is actively oppressing them. Him being exiled from his family and becoming an enemy of the empire would have been irrelevant for the people who needed a symbol to represent themselves. And Zero was that symbol because Zero wasn't Britannian or Japanese or any other nationality. He was a metaphor, a symbol of change and hope. This is, in my opinion, a huge difference between the two series. And this is entirely my interpretation. This is how I perceived the stories. Simply put, Code Geass has a more hopeful tone to it, as well as a happy ending, while Attack on Titan has a very bleak, depressing tone throughout the entire series, as well as the ending. And it feels symbolic of the perspective of the oppressed as opposed to the privileged. Hear me out. Attack on Titan is the perspective of the oppressed. The protagonist, the setting. We see the story through the eyes of the Eldians who are being attacked and marginalized. We see their desperation, their fear. We see both the lives of the Eldians living on Paradise Island and those who live in Marley. Watching Attack on Titan, you feel hopeless. You feel their emotions, which are mostly negative, because this was their reality. You feel like a bird stuck in a cage, because that's what they are. Code Geass is, mostly, the perspective of the privileged. The protagonist is Britannian, not an 11. We almost never see the slums where 11s live. We don't see how they struggle to survive, how their daily lives look. We get to see funny and light-hearted slice-of-life episodes of Ashford Academy and their rich students. But would we get the same perspective if those episodes were set in 11 schools? Probably not. It's easier for Code Geass to give us funny episodes like the school festival or the cat running around with Zero's helmet on, because this was their reality. The oppression of the 11s was always secondary to Lelouch's story. And I'm not trying to criticize Code Geass for not showing us more of the 11s, because that was not the point of the story. The series is about an exiled prince and the struggle for power within the royal family. And they did an amazing job at that. And Code Geass was definitely not all fun and games. It was very dark at times. But the atmosphere was not hopeless. It was suspenseful. It gave you hope that Lelouch would succeed. Whereas Attack on Titan felt like a losing battle. And it kind of was one. The last thing I want to talk about is the outcome. What did the world look like after the death of the protagonist? What was it all for? This is a major difference, because Code Geass had a happy ending, while Attack on Titan didn't. Lelouch sacrificed himself for the sake of the world and managed to change it for the better. Eren sacrificed himself for the sake of his friends and wiped out 80% of the world's population in the process. After Eren's death, the series doesn't try to portray his actions as the right choice by any means. The world isn't suddenly at peace. Conflict hasn't stopped. It only shifted into a different form. No one is pretending the outcome of his actions, getting rid of Titans, outweighs the negative impact it had on humanity as a whole, the mass destruction he caused. But it also doesn't put the whole blame on him, saying this outcome is a result of all of our choices. The show very blatantly portrays violence and destruction as inherent to human nature, and Eren is only human after all. The ending sequence is a time-lapse into the future, and it shows humanity building and destroying itself over and over, like a vicious cycle that humans can never escape. because we never learn. And at the very end, we see a person, very far into the future, walking into the tree under which Eren was buried, implying that they will discover the power of the Titans and history will be repeated. Or at least, that's how I interpret it. Code Geass, on the other hand, ends on a more positive message. As long as people are willing to fight for what is right, humanity will always progress and good will prevail. It's a glass half full, glass half empty type of situation, in my opinion. Evil will always exist. Violence will always exist, unfortunately. But it is up to us to choose how we view life and to make the most we possibly can out of the very limited time we have on this sometimes hellish earth. And I cannot finish this video without addressing the elephant in the room. The very real genocide that is currently being carried out in Gaza. While we can sit here and discuss a fictional genocide, Palestinians are experiencing these horrors as we speak. It wouldn't feel right to make a video about such topics without addressing it. I will be leaving links in the description for multiple charities that are providing aid for Palestinians, if you would like to donate as well. I've made a donation myself. Unfortunately, it's not very much, but I know every little bit helps. That is all I'm going to say for today, because holy shit, I've been yapping for hours. It's currently 7 p.m. and I started filming this at 11:30 a.m. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope the wait was worth it. I'm sorry it took so long. I just started a new full-time job in July, and I also had the flu, a funeral, and multiple vet emergencies all in the past 2 months. So I wasn't exactly in the right headspace to write and film such a depressing video. Hopefully the next video will come out way quicker than this one, and it will definitely be more lighthearted. So be on the lookout for that. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, comment, like. I'm so tired. I am so sorry. I just need to go. Like, I actually need to go. If you stayed until the end, until now, I love you. Thank you so much. And don't be a Nina, guys. Don't be a Nina. Okay. Bye.